All right, here's one for you. You always seem to be so neat and tidy when mixing your paints on your palette. Well, thank you. I struggle with this. I find that I end up polluting my white and making a complete mess of my colors. I think I know what I'm doing wrong. Could you share your expertise on mixing and keeping a clean, tidy palette? Okay, let's do some tidying up. Well, people often comment on that, and on that I wear a white shirt when I'm demonstrating and don't seem to get any paint on it, where you don't see the outtakes. But anyway, there is a system that you can teach yourself so that you keep at least keep a palette that is organized enough so that you can always tell where you are, and so that you don't contaminate your paints, your feeder colors, the colors that you put out that are part of the mixtures. One, paper towel. If you'll notice, when I'm demonstrating, I will often have a paper towel in one hand and the brush in the other. It's just a part of the whole activity of painting that enables you to be neat. The other thing is how you arrange your colors to begin with. Now maybe that's first, but anyway, if you will arrange your colors on the palette so they have some logic to them, that enables you then to find the colors more easily. And so now there is another quick tip that explains this, but I'll briefly go over it with you. When putting down your colors, put them down according to the logic of the color wheel. Now I always begin with white on the very end. This is my logic because I'm working, what is that, right to left. That's just a system I've developed over the years that you could go this way if you needed to. It wouldn't matter as long as you have an organization to it. And then if you'll notice, the first color next to white is yellow. Yellow is the lightest color on the color wheel. And then I come forward and I have the yellow going. And in this case I have yellow ochre. That is also a yellowish yellow ochre light. And then I'll have the yellow orange, and then it goes around to red, and so on over to green. You see, that's the same way as the color wheel is arranged. So if you arrange your palette according to how the colors appear on the color wheel with some kind of logic, that makes it easier then for you to know what to reach for when you're mixing your colors. So that's the first thing. The second thing is probably the most important as far as mixing goes. Whether you're mixing with palette knife or with brush. When you reach for a color, make this practice. No matter how excited you are about your painting or what's going on in the painting, if you reach for a color, first of all, reach for it not in the center of it like this, not just digging into it like that. That gives you no control whatsoever. But let me get this cleared up now. Now pull this off the palette knife. Reach into it at the edge of the color so that you can control the amount you pick up. And then put it down, mix it in. And you see, when you mix it in, don't mix it like mad like that, but mix it by pulling from the edges of the pile into the paint itself. You pull back and forth from the edge of the pile into the paint itself until you get it mixed the way you want it. Then wipe off the palette knife. And that's the key to keeping your colors pure, is wipe off the palette knife before you reach for another color. So that's really a practice. If you develop it and make a habit of it, you'll do it automatically without thinking about it. But what about when you're in the process of painting and you're picking up paint? Well, for one thing, you're not going to keep the palette completely organized as you move into a painting. As you get more, further and further into the painting, and you have more and more mixing going on over here, your organization is going to get kind of destroyed. So when that happens, when you reach the point when you can no longer find the color area that you're working in, it's time to stop, clear the palette off, clear off the paint. No matter, don't think of it as wasting. It's wasting when you can't find what you want and you end up with the wrong color. So just clear that away and reset the palette. But there's another thing. When you're in the process of mixing with your brush, for example, say suppose I've got this color and I don't want that color, that intensity. I want to reduce the intensity. Don't dig your brush directly into the paint, but pull it again from the edge, so that you always have a clear paint above it. And you pull it from the edge here. Then you go to the area where you want to mix. See where I have here? You pull the paint from the edge there, and you give it just enough mixing by pulling the brush into it. Not this. This doesn't get you anywhere. That just messes everything up and causes the paint to sprawl out. But giving it gentle strokes and watching the color, and once you have the color mixed, then you go ahead and you place it. But then suppose you want to go into another mixture. Here again, stop, and if the other mixture is the same value, you can simply pull that paint off the brush like this, and if you pull off enough of the paint, you can go into another value, or the same value of another color, you see, and pick up that color, and you'll be okay. But watching your process like this is key to keeping a neat palette, keeping it neat and organized so you can work. Now there's a myth out there that the more paint an artist gets onto them, the more creative they are. And that is simply a myth. You don't have to get paint all over yourself in order to be a creative painter. In fact, you have more control and more freedom when you keep your palette organized and when you can control the amount of paint that you're pulling into your brush. Okay, there's another thing. Suppose you need an absolute clean brush. Suppose you're moving from one value into the other. I'm moving from a darker value into a lighter value. How do I do that without messing up everything? It's very simple. Rinse the brush off. Have a good solvent. This is just the odorless mineral spirits. This is the Gemsol odorless mineral spirits. There are several odorless mineral spirits. It doesn't matter what kind of solvent you use. But then I have underneath me here, I have a pad of paper towels. And I always push my brush into that pad of paper towels to pull out the excess liquid or solvent. Then I'll go to a clean place of my paper towels, and I will do this. Squeeze it right there where the bristles are joined to the ferrule. I squeeze it and I bend it back and forth like that as I pull the brush away or out of the paper towel. And sometimes I will even check it a little bit further to be sure that it's absolutely rinsed and dry. Now when you rinse it, if you don't pull out the excess solvent, that too is going to cause a mess. It's going to be too liquid and you lose control of the paint. Okay, now there are several hints right there about how to keep a neat, clean palette. There's some other things that you need to pay attention to while you're doing this. One is when you load the brush. I already pointed out to you that you load the brush from the edge of the paint and moving up into the paint that you're working from as you load the brush. Avoid allowing paint to get all built up in the brush. Now I've seen that, especially in the shorter brushes like this one. I've seen a lot of people do that, and it just gives me a cringe because I know what's going to happen. So I've seen this happen. I'll do it for you. I've seen people just dip their brush in there and they pick up all that paint in there where already you've lost control because you don't know how much paint is in here. And they'll keep messing in it and they'll get more and more and more and more paint in there where you've lost control. Still, you don't know what you've got in there. And the paint gets built up right in here. Then they'll take that whole mess and then it's all out of control. You don't know what you've got. So avoid doing that kind of thing. That also will cause paint to build up right up where the bristles of the brush join into the ferrule. And it can cause the brush to wear out a whole lot sooner. And then I've seen people do that, and then when they apply the paint to the canvas, I'll show you right here on the palette, they'll push it really hard like that. Well, that also causes you to lose control. When you push the push the brush so hard that it causes the brush to bend out, and the ferrule of the brush is actually what's touching the canvas. You don't have any control when you're doing that, and it causes mess here, and it causes mess here. You can see already how messy this is getting, and if I continue that way, I wouldn't be able to control anything of the color mixes I've got. All right, so and then I've seen people take a brush like that and reach in, and there's why you contaminate your paint. When you reach into that brush, into that paint like that, that's when you contaminate your paint. So what I suggest to you about adding white, or especially all the lighter colors, I will pull this away. What I suggest to you is that when you're in the process of painting, instead of reaching the brush into these mixtures here, either pull the paint down like this, the colors that you're going to use, pull them down, and then reach the brush into the edge here, so that only this much gets contaminated. But if you reach it into the pile of paint itself, it is going to get contaminated. Now, there probably are other things too. The other thing, I avoid getting the paint on my hands if I possibly can, because I know that that can cause a mess. If the paint gets on the handle of the brush, then that's going to get on you, and you're going to have messy hands. So you don't have to do that. If you'll notice, really neat house painters will always be controlling the amount of paint that's in the brush they're using, and they won't be allowing the paint to go everywhere else too. So it's a matter of control, a matter of thinking through, and just developing new habits. And if you will do that, there again, it's building in memory. In the previous quick tip, I talked about how to move the brush and how to build muscle memory. If you create a practice that enables you to have an organized palette, be careful when you're mixing, use good mixing practices. When you're picking up paint in the brush, pick up the paint in the brush with good practices, not just jabbing the brush in the middle of the paint. Just a few things you can do there like that, and then you will have a neat palette. You will, as I said before, it will begin to get disorganized as you get further and further into the painting, but that's when you stop and you clear it up and reset the palette so that you'll know where you're going. Try those habits and see if you too can't always have a neat and tidy palette. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.